Nick, again, we just want to say thank you for being on the podcast. We appreciate you spending some time out of your day and talking with us.
No, I appreciate you guys inviting me on for sure. I've known John for a while now, and Jean, this is my first time meeting you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, pleasure to meet you.
The screen name is the Fittest Doc, but it should be like most handsome Jactus Doc, I think personally. But that's my own opinion, you know.
Yeah, before we fall off the rail already.
This is a professional podcast, okay?
Yeah. So, would you mind just spending some time letting us know about like your your medical history, how you got into that, and also the story that fitness takes along with your like medical career?
I went to Ohio State University for med school, and while in med school, as you know, you probably have heard how many hours medical students study. I initially got into med school with kind of my release from studying and from the stress was martial arts. I've grown up loving martial arts, from Taekwondo to Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, most recently Krav Maga, and in medical school, while training Krav Maga and just enjoying the stress relief that gave me, I got into CrossFit after, CrossFitters like I do, man. After CrossFitters in the gym where I was at, Ohio Krav Maga and Fitness, they just kept railing me every single day. Hey, you look like you'd be good at this. You should join us. And I was not about it at first. I told him, I was like, every single day you guys are on the ground after the workout, staring at the ceiling for like 3 to 4 minutes. None of you can move. Like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to subject myself to that? And like after like 3 months of just hammering away, they finally got me to try it, and I've loved it ever since. And I've been a practitioner of CrossFit now since 2010. So I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
I love it. I definitely advocate for both its efficacy and its use amongst my patients, though I am definitely not single-minded when it comes to CrossFit. As I tell my patients, there are many different other avenues for fitness, right? I literally just saw a patient I'm a steady MD doctor, and I'll get to that in a while, but I literally just saw a patient who, he lives in another state, but he told me that kind of growing up, his activity, his sport was mountain biking. And that right now he doesn't do anything for fitness, no exercise. So one of the things that he wanted me to help him with was kind of getting back into exercise. And I'm a firm believer that if you loved it in the past and for whatever reason you got away from it, guess what? You have to find a way to get back into that, because you're still going to enjoy it. So yeah, in as much as CrossFit is a great training methodology and is effective for a lot of people, I don't think it's the only way. I think ultimately you just have to get people moving, whether it's dance, yoga, Pilates, running, CrossFit, biking, figure it out and, do something.
So I have just one question before we get into, talking about COVID-19, because I think that's a really important thing to get to. So for you, have you always been kind of like felt like fitness and health are very intertwined? You know what I mean? Like, because I know that there's a whole thing with like, there's a lot of doctors that maybe don't work out and they don't really talk about fitness very much. You obviously see it as it's very important to you. So have you always kind of felt like this is something that's important to me, so I'm going to kind of blend that in with being a doctor as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that initially, John, I did not necessarily, so my background before med school was engineering, right? So I graduated with a BS in mechanical engineering from Michigan State University. And at that time, I did not know as much health and medicine oriented things as I do now, obviously. So back then, no, I absolutely did not know that, health and fitness were so intimately intertwined. In my opinion, at that time I was into, from soccer that I grew up playing and then martial arts that I got into after. I was more so just of the, mindset that this stuff is fun, right? Like, how would you not want to do this? This is a good time. But I think that especially as I got into CrossFit in medical school, and then furthermore, when I started to see the patients who I saw in medical school and residency and then clinical practice afterward. And you start to see, I mean, you know, from day one, and well, not day one really, kind of year 3 in med school, when you're kind of thrown into the clinical world of medicine, you start to see how many disease processes are intimately associated and intertwined with fitness and or the lack thereof of fitness, and not just fitness, but choices as it pertains to nutrition. So, I mean, we live in a world right now where, you know, a good amount of deaths, I believe upwards of 70% of deaths, are ultimately preventable. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that word preventable, you know, very much is related to one's lifestyle choices, the choices that one makes in their life. And so yeah, you know, I am absolutely now of the opinion, after seeing the thousands and thousands of patients that I've seen since third year of med school, that, you know, there are, yes, listen, every time I bring this up, you will have people who will say, okay, well, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, right? I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, right? Or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Yes, I entirely understand that. There are going to be autoimmune diseases which no amount of fitness, no amount of nutrition is necessarily going to be able to help you with. However, they are not the large contingent of disease processes in this world. The larger contingent of disease processes are entirely preventable by the choices that you make. And, you know, with that, I think that's one of the more frustrating parts of being a physician and being a doctor, is when you see people who come in to see you and are very much of the mindset of, okay, doc, give me a pill, right? Or give me some medicine for this. And the whole time I'm like, why? We don't need to do medicine, you know, like we can, like, yes, I'm not sitting there and telling you this is going to be easy, but we could entirely remedy this over a period of months to years, potentially by changes to your habits and changes to your lifestyle. And, you know, as I commonly comment on and believe, I mean, on my Instagram page, I literally have an entire subset of posts that I caption "Mindsets Matter," because I truly fundamentally believe that people's mindsets, I mean, if your mindset is not in the correct place, you will not know to take the hard path, right? To do things that maybe are a little bit harder at first, but that have large dividends and large payoffs in the long term. So, you know, I'm a huge believer that you have to address patients' mindsets and have to do so in a caring and considerate way, because everybody believes their mindset is correct initially. And then, you know, you have to be able to convince them that there's another way. So.
Yeah, that's super good. I started learning about the medical side from CrossFit. So like I had zero medical knowledge of health and fitness and all that. But, you know, CrossFit definitely has pivoted towards the health side of things. Sure. And then also but the people on the podcast have heard this so much, but I just recently took my level 1 about a month ago.
Nice.
Yeah. And
he failed.
No. Yeah, I didn't learn anything, but I definitely took it.
I was in the room.
Yeah. But to hear, you know, you hear the CrossFit's perspective, and in the back of your mind, there's always a little bit like, well, they're a business and they want to, you know, they definitely have a set of beliefs that they want to promote. And so hearing it also from like the medical perspective and hearing it like connect and like they make sense and they're in agreement. It definitely is like, I've been a lot more interested, probably just because CrossFit has been more intentional about it, but I've been a lot more interested in the medical aspects or the health aspects of fitness. And it's so funny that what we've done is we've separated them when they really are the same, you know, one and the same.
They're intertwined for sure. And like for me, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so I'm associated with CrossFit Health, like a lot of doctors,
Nice.
Well, a lot of CrossFit doctors these days. And yeah, Jean, you know, I completely see where you're coming from. I mean, only in the last year and a half, 2 years, has CrossFit essentially kind of redirected their focus away from the CrossFit Games and more towards CrossFit as a remedy for chronic disease that, you know, is so prevalent in the world. And, you know, I think one of the things that like is most awesome is hearing, I don't know if you ever had the chance to hear Greg Glassman speak on it, but I mean, trust me when I tell you, I understand the, you know, potential thinking in your head, okay, you know, CrossFit's only really doing this because it helps their bottom line, but that isn't it at all. I mean, you know, actually people who follow kind of the CrossFit methodology and the nutrition side of things. And by the nutrition side of things, Jean, I'm sure, you know, I don't mean paleo, right? I don't necessarily mean any specific thing. I just mean kind of a focus on whole foods, you know, a focus on staying away from processed food and kind of high sugar content. I mean, listen, people who I know who personally, who I see CrossFit in the gym, and there's a guy I work out with, I think he's like 41 or 42. This guy smokes me like every single day, right? And, you know, when you look at the fitter people in the gym who are older and you just ask them about their medical issues and their chronic health issues, I mean, more often than not, you're going to be surprised to find out they're on no pills, right?
Yeah.
They have no medical issues, right? And there is not, in my opinion, there is a correlation here, right? That they've essentially picked the right training methodology and followed a good nutritional outlook that is preventing them from having so many issues that people over the age of 25 are usually suffering from and usually taking pills for. And, you know, I don't know about your goals, but my goal in life is to not be on a pill for as long as possible. And,
Totally.
you know, I don't, that's not something that anyone can sit here and tell me, oh, that's natural. As you get older, like you have to be like, no, that's nonsense. Right. And I'm sorry, but any doctor who is, you know, peddling that mindset, usually more often than not is a doctor who doesn't live the lifestyle and they simply are not aware of the nuances here. And, you know, in my opinion, should not be someone that anyone listens to or kind of looks up to, because I'm not, just not.
I love pretty much everything you're saying. Is I've been through it, right? Like I remember when I was at my heaviest, I talk about the victim mindset. Like I had this victim mindset of, I even wore shirts. I had a shirt that said "Born to be Big" on it. It was like
it was like his favorite shirt.
It was my favorite shirt. I wore it all the time. I even got a bleach stain on it, and I still wore it. But like I truly was like, I would make the joke of, oh, I don't have a metabolism. Oh, like this is broken. This is why I can't lose weight. And so I was always in this victim mentality, and it's just crazy how much you can justify. Like I basically had in my head had justified I'm eventually going to get diabetes. It wasn't an if. It was like, I don't know when this is going to happen, but it's going to happen. And then I had justified that I am going to pass away before I'm 50 years old. It was just a fact, right? And being able to switch that mindset and like, so instead, like someone like you, that's why I think it's so cool that you do what you do, because if I were to go in to your office, right, and probably like, oh, there's nothing I can do, you wouldn't be like, all right, well, let me just put you on this pill and this pill and this pill, and like, yeah, you're kind of screwed, but here you go. You'd be like, no. Like we can change the path of your life, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, luckily I was able to kind of get there on my own. But the fact that there's someone in your position that say I from, 10 years ago went into you saying, there's nothing I can do. So just tell me what pills to take, doc. And you're like, nah, that's not what we're going to do first of all, you know what I mean? Let's talk about these things. I think that that's a really important thing in medicine, because there's so, like you said, there's so many people that it's their lifestyle that is leading them down the path of needing all of these different things. And like, again, it's not like it's everybody, right? There are certain things like Jean's wife has type 1 diabetes. Like she works out, she does CrossFit. It just happens, right? It's not like it's going to solve everything, but it can help in so many ways. And it's like, that's why I love talking about this stuff. It's like, it's so.
That's, John, that's, I've never heard your outlook or what you just said because obviously I follow you on YouTube, and watch your videos, but I've never heard you say that, right? In terms of kind of the victim mindset is something, I mean, you're right. That is so prevalent amongst people, not just who are overweight, but obviously with other issues that, I mean, listen, man, I am, there's nothing I hate more than weak, should I even call it weak, non-advantageous, self-defeating mindsets. Let's put it that way. Self-defeating mindsets, right? Because if you have a mindset like that, that's self-defeating, you're never gonna kind of dig yourself out of that grave that you put yourself in, right? It's not gonna happen. So I think I'm kind of fascinated now, John, like given that type of mindset is usually, the type of mindset where you're going to sustain that for the rest of your life, and you're not going to really kind of get yourself out of your situation. Why do you think that? What caused this switch in your mindset, right? From something that was self-defeating to kind of a stronger mindset where you're like it's going to take me a while, but I'm going to defeat this. How did you make that transition?
It's really hard to say. Like, I have what I call my click moment, which was I was watching Miami Ink., which is a show that's like all about tattoos, and like it was like back in the day. I was binge watching that on Netflix, and a guy came on the show that had lost a lot of weight, and he was getting a tattoo to commemorate his weight loss. But it was something about that. It made me realize that truly it was all about choices. And like, that's kind of the thing that came into my mind was I am making the choices to be my size, because that was 20 years old. And up until then, like, I mean, I still lived with my mom at the time, but I think in the back of my head, it was almost like, oh, well, it's just because we don't have that much money, and, I just eat garbage. And then I would make the excuse of, well, I eat the same foods as my brother Jean does and the same foods as my friends do, but in reality, I was eating literally 3 to 4 times as much as they are. But once I finally, it really was that once I realized it was my fault, like my choices, it just happened. And then like for me, being able to sustain that, I wasn't one of the people that lost 50 pounds, then gained it back a bunch of times. I literally, my willpower was 0 before this. Like, I lost maybe 10 pounds at the most my whole life. So once I started being like, okay, I didn't know what I was doing, but once I was like, I'm going to make changes, and I'm going to stop drinking soda, eating fast food, and eating junk food. Like the stuff that no matter how much knowledge you have about nutrition, maybe if I cut this out, I will lose weight. And once I did that, I started seeing weight loss. And like, for me, someone that never really saw it, seeing, oh my God, I'm making these changes and I'm actually seeing my body change because of it. So, because for so long it was, there's nothing I can do. Like I cannot do it. My body's messed up or something. But then once I actually put in the work and was patient, because for me, patience is a very hard thing. But once I was patient with the results and saw myself actually changing, for me, it was like a game changer. And like, that's why I feel very lucky, and I struggle with understanding people that have lost a massive amount of weight and then gained it back. I mean, I understand why, because a lot of times they're losing it in a very unhealthy way and it's just not sustainable. But like for me, it was like in my head, it was like, there's no way I'm gaining weight back, because I was like, I can't believe I'm finally doing it. And so for me, it was literally just seeing the actual progress and realizing for me that, oh, I actually can lose weight. It's not like my body is broken. Like I can actually do this. And it completely changed. Like they changed that. And then so many other things, like with, oh, I can actually try and do this. I can try and do that. Like, because growing up, I was really bad in school. So I never tried ever. And like, there's so many things that I think honestly, because of my weight and how I felt about that, it manifested in so many other ways in my life that I was like, well, I can't do anything. I'm not good at anything. So once I started changing that, like my whole life, it really did. It completely changed.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So enough about me though, because people have heard my story about 1 billion trillion times. Let's get into, kind of the big topic of 2020 right now. And it's a very scary topic, but I think that as we've been going through it, we're learning a little bit more and more. And I am appreciative, at least, of the experts in the fields that are giving us information, because I know when you feel out of the loop and like you don't know anything, it's so much more scary. So we wrote a couple questions down. Just for you guys listening, we wrote a couple questions down. So we're just gonna get through those. Nick knows what we're gonna be asking. Just full transparency. So the first question that we have is just very basic. So like, what is the coronavirus?
So coronavirus is essentially a COVID-19 rather is a subset of different coronaviruses. So, at this point, there are many different kind of things that cause a cold, right? Adenovirus, rhinovirus, coronavirus has been one of those. And there are many different types of coronaviruses. I think that, we're at I think in total there are 7 now, but there were 6. I could be wrong about that. But essentially, this is a mutation, right? A change from a coronavirus that initially, COVID-19 rather, is a coronavirus that initially only infected animals. As of now, the running assumption is bats, but that only affected animals and then has since kind of made the jump over to human beings. I've been definitely curious about the etiology, kind of where this came from, and kind of the running theory right now, and I'm sure you've heard of this, are the wet markets in China, and just kind of the deplorable conditions there that likely facilitated the jump from animals, bats and other animals potentially to human beings. But yeah, so that's what coronavirus is. Essentially you probably heard of MERS, you probably heard of SARS. In the past, these were other fairly notable infections that were also coronavirus infections. But yeah, this specific COVID-19 is, so in terms of kind of defining things, COVID-19 is the disease. SARS, CoV-2 is the actual infection, is the actual virus that causes COVID-19. So yeah, that's a quick primer on it.
So the next question we had is, what do we know about like how it spreads in the air, on surfaces, how long, all those, like, how is it spreading so fast, and what do we know about that?
So, it is a respiratory droplet spread disease. So what I mean by that is that, when somebody coughs, when somebody sneezes, it is spread throughout the air. Usually respiratory droplet is kind of a scenario where the droplets are kind of suspended in air for a moment around the person who has coughed or sneezed, and then can drop to the floor. It can drop to other fomites, and fomites are essentially inanimate, non-living objects that can transmit infection by like a doorknob, for example, is a fomite. In terms of kind of how else you can pick this up, it can also be aerosolized. So there is speculation that, you can absolutely walk into a place where somebody who was very sick, to spread it in this manner, you'd have to be very sick, right? You'd have to have a fever, have a prolific cough, and just be kind of, quarantine, be damned. I'm still going to go out and enjoy my life, right? So those are the people who are the sickest people, are the people who are absolutely transmitting this in a way that is just absolutely terrifying, because you can literally walk into a cloud where people are, you can literally walk into an aerosolized cloud where no one is there, but you're breathing in SARS, CoV-2. Otherwise, in terms of kind of other means of infection, as I stated, the respiratory droplets can fall. They can fall onto fomites. The current evidence states that it can definitely live on certain types of fomites longer than others, right? So plastic, it can live on plastic the longest so far, 72 hours after somebody leaves respiratory droplets on that plastic. Stainless steel, 48 hours, cardboard, 24 hours, and other like things like copper, 4 hours. So, it can definitely live on these different surfaces. One thing though that needs to be clarified is that you need to reach a certain tipping point with either bacteria or viruses to the point where they can become infectious. So even though it may be on a piece of cardboard, for example, even though that cardboard may be swabbed and someone can tell you, okay, SARS-CoV-2 is on there, you don't know that it is at a density in terms of the actual virus. You don't know that it's at an infectious density, that it can actually make you sick. When it is at that density, though, yes, obviously it's concerning.
I heard that it, like kind of like we were talking about, so it may live for 72 hours on a surface, but the infectious part of it, like kind of entropies, right? And then eventually, like, even though it's there, it at one point it was infectious. It's now kind of gone to a point where it no longer is, because it, like, the infectious part of it, whatever it is that you would call that, entropied or whatever. That's true?
Oh, no, I think that's a great way to put it, Jean. Essentially, viruses do not replicate outside of the human body. They infect the human body and they use our cells they literally take us over and use our cells to replicate and then to spread. You can find it like I said, right? Plastic, cardboard, copper, all these different fomites. And as time goes on, yes, as you mentioned, there will be a certain amount of breakdown. There will be, they exist in envelopes and capsids that may not necessarily be able to live outside of the human body for that long. Beyond that point, they may still technically be detectable on a surface, though they may also not be infectious at that point.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've heard a lot in the news and like people that have been talking a lot about is how basically this disease or this virus affects different people. And it seems like what we're talking about the most, which makes sense, is the people that are at the most risk. And it seems, from what I've been hearing, it's people that are immunocompromised. And so I'm just curious, like, what does that really mean, and why are people that are immunocompromised the most at risk from this, from this becoming a deadly thing for them?
So, the word immunocompromised in medicine essentially means literally what the word says. Immune system is compromised, right? So we all have, two different branches of our immune system. And as you fight certain morbidities and fight certain diseases, or here's the other thing, live your life in a certain way, your immune system waxes and wanes, right? It can be very high, or it can be absolutely kind of low and compromised. So that's essentially what immunocompromised means. And the reason why that's concerning with COVID-19 or anything else that's infectious is that it essentially implies that your body is less capable of fighting off infection. If you, for example, get the flu or get the common cold secondary to adenovirus infection, rhinovirus infection, coronavirus infection, more often than not, immunocompetent. So I didn't even define this. So the opposite of immunocompromised is immunocompetent. Immunocompetent basically means you have a competent, strong immune system. So a lot of people, when they get the common cold or they get the flu, are able to, they don't even necessarily know it, right? Like, they have an infection. If we were to test them, and if they were to come to the doctor and we were to test them, we could say, yeah, you absolutely have an infection, but they have no symptoms. And they have no symptoms because their body is actively fighting it, actively kind of lessening the viral load, the pathogenic load. And with that, they will never have any symptoms, and then they'll eventually get rid of the infection and have no idea they even had it. I'm sorry. I'm like, my brain's going in so many different ways right now. So I hope this doesn't seem like it's not correlated because it is, but let's say a lot of people in this country, a lot of people have herpes simplex 1, right? So cold sores, right? But there are a large number of people who, I will see them in the clinic, and for whatever reason, we'll order antibodies, and we will see that people who have never had any symptoms, have never had a cold sore once, have the antibodies to herpes, right? So technically, they have the infection, right? Technically, they have the virus, but they never show any symptoms. And it's because those people are immunocompetent enough. They have a strong enough immune system that persistently keeps it suppressed. Another example of that is shingles. A lot of people, if you've had chickenpox when you were younger, guess what? You have the virus that causes shingles. But a lot of people will never have a shingles outbreak. And I really hope you don't, because it's super painful. But a lot of people will never have a shingles outbreak because their immune system keeps it suppressed. So with COVID-19, that's what's most important, right? Is figuring out ways to number one, if you have a chronic disease like type 1 diabetes, like asthma, unfortunately, you are immunocompromised by definition. And the most you can do, given that, hey, let's focus on what we can control, right? And those people, we can't control that they are immunocompromised. We can definitely control the level of how immunocompromised they are. So those people, if they're going out every day and they're getting Burger King, and they don't ever exercise, they're very dismissive of their sleep, and making other poor choices, guess what? Their level of their immunocompromise is worsened even more. But if they're making the opposite decisions and focusing on things that will bolster their immune system as much as possible, then it is absolutely possible that they could become infected with COVID-19, yet have little to no symptoms and no kind of secondary morbidity secondary to COVID-19 infection.
Yeah. With my wife being type 1 diabetic, it's definitely something I've been looking at, the compromised immune system and the type 1 diabetic. And a lot of what I've read, from JDRF or a lot of the diabetic research foundations is if you're maintaining your blood sugar in I can't remember what it's called, A1C, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And so if you're keeping that within the range of a non-diabetic, that's going to bolster your immune system. You're going to have a lot better chance of fighting it. And my wife, we were already we've tracked macros. We are relatively healthy. That was already a big deal to us. So when she found out she was type 1 diabetic, her first time, her A1C was higher than it should have been. But then by her next appointment, which I think was 3 months later, she was within range of a standard non-diabetic working pancreas. And so that's kind of been a thing of comfort for me, because I was originally when it was 2 weeks ago, at the point of recording, it was you didn't know, I didn't know anything about it. Everyone was freaking out about it. All the toilet paper was being sold out, and so then I was holy moly,
Jean goes to the bathroom a lot. Yeah. That's what he was really worried about.
But it was just do I need to be freaked out for my wife? That was kind of but from reading it and stuff like that, again, it's if you're fighting and you're healthy and you're doing what you need to be doing, fitness and health and all that, you give your immune system a fighting chance. And so
Sure.
It's been so crucial and important to us in this time is to stay focused on that and what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that goes in perfectly to what the next question was does being fit and healthy prevent this or help you in any way?
Okay, so let's attack those separately, right? Being healthy absolutely helps this because you are immunocompetent by definition. Now, I think it's important to distinguish, does it prevent it 100%? No, absolutely not. Nothing 100% will guarantee. And I get that, right? Like kind of, with anxiety and the way people's brains think, they kind of are wondering what will 100% protect me from this. And unfortunately, there's nothing that we can say.
Yeah.
All we talk about instead is risk mitigation and kind of minimizing the risk of kind of catching, not of catching this, but of having bad outcomes secondary to COVID-19 infection. So yes, being healthy and being very immunocompetent absolutely helps. Now, the secondary part of that question, being fit, absolutely. So a favorite Instagram page of mine just recently posted research on this. I think the name of the page is WOD Science, but essentially they looked into kind of the correlation of exercise with your immune system. And it has absolutely been proven at this point that people who exercise have more competent, stronger immune systems. And I mean, that kind of just makes sense to me. So yeah, you between health and fitness, kind of the fitter you are, the healthier you are, like I said earlier, that doesn't essentially knock down your risks to zero. Nothing knocks down your risk to zero, but it absolutely mitigates your risk and kind of, puts you in the best place possible for this infection.
What do they say? This is not one of the questions, so don't feel like you need to answer it perfectly. But like, there's a common like CrossFit phrase is like, what is it? Health is a hedge of protection against sickness, or there's like it's like something like that where I think that's what it is. Health is a hedge of protection against, because they kind of view it as like it's a spectrum, right? And so what you want,
the sickness wellness continuum.
Yeah, exactly. And so what you want to do is you want to get as far to the well side as you can, so that when you do come across sickness or viruses or infections, if you're already kind of leaning in the sickness side, that brings you so much further down. But if you're on that wellness side, you're still it still definitely affects you, but it's like that hedge of protection kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. So as Jean, you just said that, or as you said earlier, you took your CrossFit level 1 pretty recently. I took mine like over a year ago at this point, and I'm sure you remember from studying, the graphic, the picture, the sickness wellness continuum. And yeah, I absolutely believe in that and agree with that. I mean, at this point, if you look at data coming out of China, the people who are dying the most of this, and I'm not saying these are the only people who are dying, I'm saying most. If you look at the data, the people that the kind of morbidity, the comorbidity that is most associated with death from COVID-19 infection is hypertension, is high blood pressure. The second most commonly associated comorbidity associated with death from COVID-19 is diabetes. Rather, and I would argue, as you alluded to earlier, uncontrolled diabetes, right? Where your sugars are simply not controlled.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is kind of the reality of the situation is that, and I think that when I saw that data, the part that scared me the most is that hypertension, right? Is that high blood pressure is what's most associated with death from COVID-19, because as you have heard from, or I'm sorry, you haven't heard this, but as you may have heard from many physicians, that we call hypertension, high blood pressure, the silent killer. And the reason why we call it that is because I could be sitting here, you could be sitting there, and we have high blood pressure. We have no idea for months and months on end, right? And every single blood vessel in our body is affected by this elevated blood pressure, from your kidneys to your eyes to, in men, the thing that usually brings people into clinic and they have no idea, they'll have erectile dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
They'll be, why isn't my penis working? It's because you have high blood pressure and you're causing all types of, blood vessel changes that are not only happening in your penis, but are happening all throughout your body, because high blood pressure affects everything, right? So I think when I saw that data initially about the association between high blood pressure and death from COVID-19 infection, that terrified me, because You could have no symptoms. So many people have high blood pressure right now, and they're telling themselves, oh, even if I get COVID-19, I have no health issues. No, you have no diagnosed health issues. There's a very subtle difference there, right? And unfortunately, we live in a country where cost of healthcare is prohibitive for many people. And because cost of healthcare is prohibitive and so expensive, many people don't necessarily prioritize annual checkups and preventative visits with their doctors. And then they have all these medical issues that are either building slowly or are already present. And in their heads, they're just kind of writing it off like, I have no medical problems. And then something like this happens. And, you have people in their 20s and people in their 30s becoming infected and then dying. And, lo and behold, they had no idea that they had some health issue, some underlying health issue that they simply never addressed. So,
yeah, I think that this is kind of off the cuff, but this is something that I've been thinking a lot about because of a lot of people, especially in the United States, we don't take our health very seriously, right? Like I was one of those people, having obesity is a huge thing here in the States for sure. And a lot of people don't take it seriously because of how long those things manifest, right? Like you might have obesity for 20 years before you become diabetic or before you have any serious issues. Like I was very lucky that I never had like some crazy thing happen where I was like, oh my gosh, right? It was very slow. So for a lot of people, they don't really worry about it too much. They're like, yeah, I'm fine. I feel fine right now. But then, you talk to those same people when they're 60 years old and they're like, my body is shutting down on me, right? But with this, it's been interesting because I feel like a lot more people are realizing, oh, wow, these choices I'm making, because that word immunocompromise has been thrown around so much. It's like something I never really heard before this. Now, so many people are talking about it, and now people are looking, well, why is someone immunocompromised? And they're realizing through this conversation we're having, right? Oh, it's some of the choices I might be making because this virus doesn't take as long to take your life or have serious complications that it's like, oh, so if I take care of my body and do these things, I can avoid, hopefully, again, it's not 100%, but hopefully I can try and avoid this virus taking my life or taking a big portion of my life. And I'm interested, this is just me thinking out loud, of the repercussions of this virus in the long term, right? People realizing, oh, like if I take care of my body, I can maybe avoid having some serious issues quick, right? Because again, most of the things that we're dealing with when it comes to, maybe eating unhealthy or just not moving your body or whatever, those take a long time for issues to come up, at least issues that we notice, but with this, it's like, if you get it, it does not take that long for it to be a very serious issue. So I'm just thinking in my head, I am curious to see what happens in the long term after, we get through this initial craziness,
So two things, John, and I didn't mention this earlier, right? We talked about diabetes. We talked about high blood pressure. Unfortunately, and I should have mentioned this, being overweight, being obese is a state of immunocompromise. Like that, I understand that's terrifying, but that's the fact of the matter. It's being obese and overweight and having a lot of, especially what's called central adiposity. So carrying a lot of your weight in the midline, that's a pro-inflammatory state. And pro-inflammatory states, especially persistently pro-inflammatory states, cause immunocompromise. So, I absolutely agree, right? I think that, and I've been wondering the same thing, John, that, I really hope that this, number one, affects as little people as possible, and as little people as possible through social distancing and other good choices die from this. But then let's talk about a year from now, right? When we're hopefully past this, are people going to be able to understand that the choices that you're making have very real effects whenever something, hell, if this was last August and we were talking, did any of us know that, from a wet market in China, that a new infection was going to not only spawn, but literally be transmitted around the world so quickly, and that we would all be hermits in our homes and like,
not much has changed for me,
Yeah, I mean, essentially, not a lot of people knew that, right? So in my mind, you have to get rid of this thought process of, oh, I can ever predict it. And because I can predict it, I can get prepared for it. No, that's nonsense, right? That's why I think that the entire mindset of CrossFit, which is be prepared for that. I'm totally blanking on how they say it now.
The unknown and unknowable.
Yeah.
For the unknown and unknowable, right? Guess what? This is unknown.
We got it.
What's that? Oh, okay. Teamwork.
Yeah.
Teamwork. No, so yeah, the essential ethos behind CrossFit, right? And the unknown and unknowable. Guess what? This is unknown and this is unknowable.
Yeah.
And if you're a CrossFitter who has kind of lived the lifestyle for many years, and you're already like, I can't even tell you, and the reason why I'm about to say what I'm about to say is because I have a number of patients on SteadyMD who, I have a bunch of really sick patients, but I have a bunch of patients who are CrossFitters too. And guess what? I'm able to, as their doctor, ask intimate questions about their lives. And I can tell you straight up that CrossFitters usually make decisions in their lives that support CrossFit, right? And support their performance in the gym. If you're drinking not even Diet Coke, if you're drinking Coke every day and you're going out to Chick-fil-A every day, and you're eating just poorly every day, and you CrossFit, it is not going to take long for you to come to the understanding that my ranking on the leaderboard, where I show up on the leaderboard, and whether or not I beat Bob over here or whether or not Bob beats me is largely contingent on the choices that I make outside of the gym.
Yeah.
So I think that it's one of those things that I really hope that after this whole thing passes, people realize that there is nothing better that you can do for yourself than to be in a ready state at all times, right? In a state where, if something hits the fan, like has happened now with COVID-19, that you are, as I stated earlier, that you're not in a position where you're 0% chance of being infected, but you're at least in a position where there is minimal risk to you as possible, because you have made as you mentioned earlier, John, because you made the right decisions, because you made the right choices in your life that support health. Instead of telling yourself that, I'm just going to take a pill to get rid of this, or even worse, that I'm just going to completely ignore this and hope it goes away. What happens when something like this happens, right? And now, you're terrified. You're in your home and you're terrified, and you're thinking to yourself, I've made poor decisions as it relates to my health. And now, I am woefully concerned of what will happen to me if I get infected. And that's not a level of anxiety that I would wish upon myself or would wish upon anyone else.
Yeah. So speaking of things people do or do wrong or the right way, we had a question that was like, is there a way that you can boost your immunity? And is essential oils or teas gosh. One of them?
What supplements do I need? Doc, tell me.
I'm telling you, man. You have to read between the lines when you get questions like that, and the subtext, right? And the subtext is that there is some quick fix, that there's some pills, there's some magic pill that if I take, it'll prevent this, right? And nothing could be further from the truth, right? Especially as it pertains to essential oils. Listen, I'm not going to sit here. I've definitely had patients who tell me in the past, Dr. Nick, I'm on essential oils. I will never be that guy to be like, stop that. That's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
No, if it makes you feel better and it has any amount of psychological impact in a positive and beneficiary way, keep doing it. But in terms of, if we look at evidence, there is no evidence to support essential oil treatment for the bolstering of your immune system, kind of in the fight against COVID-19 and infection. But there are other things that you can do, and these are things that are not quick fixes. They're not pills. But kind of, let's talk about those. So as I alluded to earlier, I think the biggest thing that you can do, in my opinion, is sleep, is emphasize the positive aspects of sleep. So, there are so many benefits to sleep that, have simply not even at this point been, elucidated by scientists in terms of kind of fully articulated. But I mean, every single day, more and more research comes out that shows the benefit of sleep. And the most pertinent kind of data and research in this field, at least as it relates to what we're talking about right now, is that your immune system is compromised. I mean, this isn't hypothetical. This isn't, I mean, it has been shown your immune system has absolutely been shown to be compromised when you have compromised sleep. So if you're sleeping 4, 5, 6 hours a night, and somebody were to measure various elements of your immune system, natural killer cells, T cells, B cells, macrophages, responsiveness, like you're absolutely going to find that you are not operating at a level where you would be had you emphasized quality of sleep and duration of sleep. So I think that in that respect, the biggest thing that someone can do is emphasize, and you can Google the words that I'm about to say, but sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is the thing that I most encourage my patients to optimize, and sleep hygiene has, so many different elements that I can't necessarily comment on here, but if you Google it, you'll definitely look into the many different suggestions of sleep hygiene. But I mean, especially now in this time, sleep needs to be prioritized above all. You cannot have 5 hours or 6 hours of sleep a night and then tell yourself that you're good to go, because you're not. Another thing that I think that people can do, and I understand in this time that it's definitely harder, is anxiety, right? And kind of mental stressors. So, stress has been associated. No, let me qualify that. Let me back up. Chronic stress has been associated with being immunocompromised. Transient stressors, and by transient I mean things that happen and pass, right? So CrossFit, for example, is a transient stressor. When we're in the gym doing a WOD, you're being stressed. Mm-hmm. Now the thing is that isn't a stress that's continuous, right? That isn't, you're not going through that 24 hours in the day. But transient stressors have actually paradoxically been associated with a bolstering of the immune system and a strengthening of the immune system. But if you're chronically stressed, if you're the type of person who's a chronic worrier, you worry about everything, your anxiety is uncontrolled, either pharmacologically or with mindfulness techniques, and you just, that's going to affect your immune system. So kind of, especially when it pertains to kind of anxiety and things like that, I'm a huge believer in, and I get it, some people have anxiety that's bad enough that they need medication. But, as I'm sure you guys have been able to figure out about me so far, I like to approach things from a non-medication aspect at first. And because of that, I like to, especially with anxiety, approach things with mindfulness techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy, essentially addressing the anxiety instead of just living with it, instead of embodying it as part of your, like, oh, this is just me, I'm just an anxious person. Like, that's nonsense. Look, yeah. I mean, we go to the gym to change our health, to change our body. We go to school to improve our knowledge. And in my opinion, when it comes to anxiety, like, yeah, you can sit there and have the type of mindset that we talked about earlier, John, where you're very self-defeatist and, oh, this is just something I'm going to suffer with for the rest of my life. Or you can address it head on, right? And go to prioritize therapy and prioritize mindfulness techniques like meditation and other techniques, and kind of lessen that. So in the long term, doing things like that will absolutely help your immunity. Otherwise, I think the other big things I can think about are in terms of bolstering your immunity is food. So as you mentioned earlier, Jean, your blood sugar. So there are many people who are not diagnosed with diabetes in this country who suffer from something called metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome still, even though it's not diabetes, has non-advantageous blood sugar fluctuations, secondary to the current status of your kind of how insulin sensitive you are. So things like, lifting weights, even walking, right? Obviously CrossFit, other things like that actually make somebody more insulin sensitive. So to define that, diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. So it literally takes your pancreas needs to push out more insulin to get your blood sugar in the controlled range. So things that, we can control that in terms of your insulin sensitivity by making good choices, right? Like I said, by walking, lifting weights, actually putting on more muscle in the long term makes you more insulin sensitive. CrossFit, as I mentioned, and kind of other lifting kind of modalities will have that type of effect. But I think that, in the short term, kind of the things that you can do to most affect your resistance or your kind of your immune system is to not, like, processed food in this country is associated with not only overeating, but is also associated with, as everybody knows, sugar and ridiculous amounts of sugar. And obviously it makes sense that if you're eating things that are very, very high in sugar, it's going to be much more difficult to control the transient changes in your blood sugar. And in a time like this where uncontrolled blood sugar changes are having, deleterious effects and damaging effects on people's immune systems, with respect to COVID-19 infection, like you don't want that, right? And, I don't want people to think to themselves, oh, I'm not diabetic. I'm not type 1 diabetic or type 2 diabetic. Like, I'm fine when it comes to blood sugar. No, you're not fine. Like, if every single meal that you're eating is processed foods, junk food, fast food. I mean, it's hilarious to me that, like, we're all quarantined, right? And then you'll see on Instagram, people are just like eating just like garbage. And like the whole time I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, like, do you realize you're literally making yourself more immunocompromised?
Yeah.
Like, this is not the time for that, So yeah, I'm a big believer in kind of whole food, consumption and, minimal sugar, minimal processed food, minimal junk food. Obviously I'm not perfect, right? I love Chick-fil-A. So I'm not,
Yeah.
you gotta live your life sometimes, but you need to make that a rarity. It can't be a staple. It can't be every single day.
Yeah, you almost ruined my lunch plans when you brought up Chick-fil-A, and I was like, that's literally what I was going to do right after this.
Now he's just going to get the grilled chicken sandwich.
Yeah. But it is pretty interesting, like what you're like, because Sam, my wife, has the continual glucose monitor. She has the Dexcom, and like, so we kind of get to see the trends of her blood sugar and how it's going, and kind of like what you're saying, like, when we go on a walk, like if her blood sugar is running kind of high and like she's taking insulin, it's not, and it's still kind of running high, almost without fail, go a 10, 15 minute walk and it's just going to start dropping, like, because it is like, it's interesting. Or, when we're doing CrossFit and it's like a weightlifting EMOM, her blood sugar will actually spike during that time and then go down afterwards. And it's interesting. It's kind of like, it's not direct science, but it is very, hearing what you say about high stress or going on walks, like, it has immediate effects on her blood sugar. And so to imagine that in the long term, someone who's never going on walks or is constantly going on walks, someone who is constantly stressed or is able to, have the transient stress, like, my brain automatically starts making those connections, because on a very small scale, I see that with her continual glucose monitor.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny because I will straight up recommend, like, whenever somebody comes in and sees me, whenever I have a new SteadyMD patient and, they want to know the first, let's say they're physically inactive, right? And they want to know the first change that they can do from an exercise standpoint. I will recommend walking, like, a good amount of the time. And it's literally because of what you just suggested, John. I mean, there's a good amount of data that shows that I mean, the positive blood glucose, the positive sugar effects that you will find with walking are undeniable. And yeah, I commonly recommend walking to my diabetic patients, whether it's pre-diabetes or kind of the initial stages of type 2 diabetes, and right after dinner, right? Because I mean, you will see their blood sugars like drop pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And you know, my goal with pre-diabetics is always to move them as far away. Like when you're a pre-diabetic, you can either move closer towards diabetes or further away, right? And I always want to like move them like, here, let's do all of these things. Let's move you this way so that I never have to start you on medication for diabetes. But yeah, you know, I think that's the beauty of continuous glucose monitors. I you know, the most recent one that I'm a biggest fan of are so you can search for these guys on Instagram, but Levels Health. They have a CGM that is kind of for people like me and you who may not have diabetes, but want to definitely see the firsthand effects of their lifestyle choices on their blood sugar, right?
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'd probably win.
Wait, how so?
I don't know. I'm just being stupid.
Okay. Yeah. So no, Levels Health is great for that, and I think that you know, it's amazing, man, that you know, that we live in a time where we can literally see our blood sugar and the changes that are happening secondary to our choices. But and then another thing, just me being nerdy, right, and explaining. But so the reason why you see a blood sugar spike with CrossFit and with other high intensity interval trainings is because that's actually associated with a transient and short-term elevation of your stress hormones. So think about it, right? CrossFit, you know, 10-second countdown, 3, 2, 1, go. During that time, like there is epinephrine, there's literally adrenaline flooding your system. You know, if it's early in the morning, your cortisol is high. There are a whole lot of what are called stress hormones that are released by your body. And these stress hormones have no other goal but to increase your blood sugar, because that increased blood sugar facilitates glucose uptake, sugar uptake by your muscles in the short term while you're doing a WOD that will kind of facilitate exercise. So it's completely normal to see short-term elevations in sugar while you're doing CrossFit. But those are quickly remitting blood sugars that quickly will drop down afterward. And, you know, it's funny because like, I make this joke with people, but I mean, it's something that I do. Like I will only ever, like if I want like Starbucks cookies, right? Chocolate chip cookies. I love their chocolate chip cookies, right? So I'll be like, you know, microwave me 3 of those, and I'll usually only eat that stuff immediately after a workout, immediately after a WOD, because that's when you're actually most insulin sensitive. So, I mean, it takes the least amount of insulin to just destroy, to bring your blood sugar back into normal range immediately after the workout. So, but with something like walking, you're not going to have that short-term elevation in stress hormones because it's walking, right? Your body's like, I don't need that. With something like CrossFit, where, I mean, think about CrossFit, right? Like we're essentially almost replicating a physiological response of like back in the hunter-gatherer days when like out in the bushes and you see a lion and a lion like makes eye contact with you. Yeah. Like all the changes that happen in your body when you're like, oh crap, I'm going to die if I don't get out of here. Like that's what's happening in CrossFit. So it makes sense that your body's just going to flood you with stress hormones and do everything it can to kind of get you out of that situation.
Yeah. And then, so just to kind of, just the last question that we had written down on the questions we wanted to ask about COVID was, and this is something that I think is important to talk about because this is literally hopefully it's affecting everyone that's listening. Yeah, is the whole social distancing, right? Like what is social distancing? I mean, I feel like we probably don't need to answer that question because we're all doing it now. But like, why is that so important? Because me and John, we live in California, and it's shelter in home, so we're basically not supposed to leave unless you're getting food, basically, is kind of, or taking care of someone. So why is that in place, and what's the whole reason for it?
Okay. No, that's a really good question. I think that a lot of people don't necessarily understand why, like the efficacy, the basis of social distancing. So let's define it first. So social distancing is the combination of kind of, an avoidance, right, of public transportation, of the office, of crowded places, of even intimate contact with other people, like shaking hands, and the avoidance of kind of close proximity to others in general. Kind of the reason it was instituted and recommended is because it dramatically decreases the spread of COVID-19 from infected members of the society to non-infected members of society. So don't get me wrong, this won't stop. Like this doesn't stop the spread of the virus. It still spreads, but it spreads much, much more slowly. And, this is important because COVID-19 has what's called a reproductive number and an R0. And that reproductive number is essentially the amount of people somebody who is infected with COVID-19 could potentially infect. The reproductive number of COVID-19 is essentially, as of right now, it's estimated to be either as high or even potentially a bit higher than the flu. Given how I defined the R0, people who are infected with COVID-19 essentially at this point spread the infection to other people who are not infected exceedingly well, right? They spread the infection even better than people who are infected with flu spread their infection. So a secondary reason why social distancing is recommended, in addition to its R0, is the fact that those infected with COVID-19 can actually take 1 to 2 weeks to present with symptoms. And during this time, even though they may not have symptoms and that symptomatic presentation is a week or two down the line, these same people who don't have symptoms are going to be spreading the virus in, the same way that we discussed earlier, either coughing or sneezing in an area or coughing into their hands, and shaking somebody else's hand. I mean, these same people who may not necessarily be super symptomatic are going to be spreading the infection kind of without knowledge of doing so. So social distancing essentially helps to minimize infection due to both of these factors.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of when I first heard about it and it first started happening, right? Because I think for me, the first thing that happened that was like, whoa, I can't believe they did that was they closed down the Arnold Sports Festival, right? They stopped the exhibition or whatever, the expo. And I remember being like, oh, that's so ridiculous. Like, I can't believe they're doing that because I didn't know anything about COVID-19 or the coronavirus. Like I was just like, oh, whatever. It's just another thing. And I was like, I can't believe that they've done that. Fast forward, it's been over a month since that happened. The thought of that many people together stresses me out now. I'm like, why would we do that? And so now that I've been, obviously, I think everyone is in the same boat as me, I would assume, as far as like, you didn't know anything about it, so you felt like any measure was kind of over the top. But now, the more I learn about it, the more I understand why these things are important. And I think that's why I really wanted to have you on and speak about this, because I know for me, it was actually a podcast that made me realize how this is actually a big deal. I was actually listening to the Joe Rogan Experience, and he had a virologist on there. And I remember I had to drive up to LA, and the whole podcast, it was very middle of the road. He wasn't saying like this is going to end the world and everyone's going to burn up or whatever, but he also wasn't like, oh, it's no big deal, everything will be fine, like everyone's overreacting. He was just very like middle of the road, this is what's going to happen. And realizing just what this virus is and how it spreads and the reason for social distancing, and understanding that, what this virus can do to you, and the fact that you might need a bed and there might not be enough beds. That's why we're doing this. And, the reason, at least from what I've seen, is like social distancing is to help the healthcare system take be actually able to help people. Because if there's too many people, what are we going to do, right? You see what happened in Italy, which I don't even like to think about because it's just like horrifying, right? Choosing, well, we'll help this person because they'll help society more than this 75-year-old whatever. Like that's a horrible thing to think of, right? So helping you guys basically, but it's just weird because the way we help is by doing nothing. Like, just stay home. They've seen the memes of like, my grandfather helping the country, like going, or like my great grandfather going into war, and then me helping, sitting on the couch watching Netflix.
And that's a great argument too for like why when people are whining about this, you're like, really? Like your grandparents like went to war, right? And like we're asking you to stay at home and watch Netflix. Like this is too hard for you? Are you kidding me? But no, I definitely agree. I think that that's the entire kind of crux of the suggestion for social distancing is that essentially if we don't limit this through social distancing, infection in this country would literally occur on an exponential basis, right? So as I mentioned that R0 number before, the R0 number as of right now is estimated to be anywhere between like 1 and 3. So essentially, if you have COVID-19 infection, you could spread it to anyone in that time period where you're infectious. You could spread it from anywhere from 1 person to 3 people. So just sit back and think about that math. If you spread it potentially to 3 people, and then those 3 people spread it to 3 people, and then those, 9 people now spread it to 3 other people each. I mean, this is an exponential spread in society, right? And that as you alluded to earlier, John, that is exactly what's happening in Italy and Iran. And essentially, that would be catastrophic on our healthcare system. Yeah. There would simply not be enough ICU beds. There would not be enough ventilators in this country to handle the tsunami of critically ill patients that would hit all at once. And I think another thing that many people don't necessarily think about is are people like your wife, Jean, who have diabetes, right? And guess what? They need follow-ups with their doctors, right? In the event that, God forbid, I'm sorry I'm bringing this up, but in the event that your wife goes into DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, and she needs an ER, and nobody listens to social distancing. Yeah. And so the hospital system, the ER, the entire hospital system is overwhelmed. And now you have people with DKA, you have people with heart attacks, you have people with emergent medical issues that need treatments in the hospital who aren't able to get that because people ignored social distancing. And now all the beds in the hospital are full, and all the doctors are busy and all the nurses are busy and healthcare practitioners are swamped. So now you have people who don't have COVID who are dying from issues that could be addressed or would have been able to be addressed in the past, and now they can't be. So, social distancing is huge, and I'm glad that Dr. Fauci and, other members of kind of the leadership behind this are recommending that. And I hope that it's something that a lot of people are following. And, I think that the only thing that it isn't that I disagree with it, I just think it's a nuance that needs to be addressed, is a lot of people are using the stay at home as a directive to literally stay at home and do nothing else, right? That's not what that means. That means avoid large groups of other people, don't go to work, stay out public transportation. But guess what? If you're staying at home and you're trying to use that as a reason to never work out anymore or to not take care of your health, that makes no sense. You can go on a run. You can, if you live by the mountains, you can go hike, right? Now, if you're hiking in a big group of people, no, that's stupid. Yeah. Please don't do that. But if you're, running or you're hiking with just yourself or maybe someone else, and you guys are staying a good distance away from one another, then that is, as we mentioned earlier, actually advantageous to your immune system and helping you kind of mitigate the anxiety that a lot of people have when they are not active and they're not moving. And, it's definitely something that I would recommend.
No, yeah, I totally agree with that because it's been interesting because there's definitely people on social media that are taking it very much so stay at home. And if I post that I'm like walking to the store or going on a run, people are like freaking out. I'm like, one, I'm by myself, and two, I have to go to the store anyways, so why not walk there? Like, it's just like people are almost using this as a way, like, well, I've been at home for 14 days and I haven't moved from my couch, so I'm better than you. It's like it's not this like weird competition of who can stay at home better. Like, we're doing this. Like, just think of like, okay, if you are going on a run by yourself, like when I go on a run, the most I have to do is maybe touch a thing to make the street light change, right? I'll do that with my elbow. Right when I get home, I shower, but I make sure I wash my hands. It's like, I'm fine. I'm not running with another person. But yeah, I think that's important to say because, yeah, people are literally thinking they have to stay inside their house. And, you know, maybe that'll end up being mandated because I've had some people that have messaged me that are living in Europe, and their law is, I think a lot of it's because it's smaller there. Everyone is closer together that it's like you literally have to stay home because for them it's like everything is so small that there is no room. But like, especially where I live, we live in California where there's space everywhere. It's like I can be outside and still be alone, you know? So
sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can't remember where this research was out of. I think it was out of like Japan, but there's been a good amount of research in the anxiety lessening effects of being out in nature, right? Like going hiking, right? And like doing things like that, are literally affect you from kind of a mindfulness standpoint and anxiety. And as we mentioned earlier, right, if you're able to minimize that, kind of that chronic stress, guess what? That's helping your immune system. So no, I agree, John. Like it's been funny to me to see people like freak out about that on social media too. Like, when you're like you said, right, you're walking by yourself to the store, right? Like it's not a bad thing at all. So yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again. I mean, that's all the questions we had. But this was a great conversation.
Yeah,
like
that went longer than I thought it was going to in the best way possible.
Yeah.
You know?
But we just want to say thank you again for being on the podcast. We're going to link how people can find you, the Fittest Doc on Instagram. Is there anywhere else you'd want people to be able to find you and kind of follow up with you?
So, I mean, the whole Instagram thing, I mean, that's great if people want to find me on that. But my main job, I am a physician for SteadyMD. So I see patients all around the country. I love the positive changes that I'm able to have on people's lives and their lifestyles through, just having a genuine discussion. And I don't know if you guys know a lot about SteadyMD, but I think that kind of the main difference that I have with that platform is that I'm able to have much longer conversations with patients about their medical issues. And so like, how long has this conversation gone on, right? An hour and a half?
Yeah.
I've had longer appointments on SteadyMD with patients who, admittedly, I think I had a 67-year-old who had like many different medical conditions, and our appointment was 2.5 hours, right? But at a baseline, most of my appointments on SteadyMD are an hour at least. And I feel that, and I found that hour is something that like, that's a good amount of time that, guess what? If somebody is making poor choices in their life, but they're open, right? So obviously there are a lot of people who make poor choices and they're not open. And listen, I'm not here to sit here and convince. If you smoke and you feel like it's important for you to smoke cigarettes, even in a time when COVID-19 infection is ravaging people's lungs, around the world, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you out of that. But there are a good amount of people who, from smoking to, lack of exercise to poor nutritional choices, there are a lot of people who genuinely want to make changes and they just need guidance. They just need help, right? To get out of that hole that they put themselves in. And, with SteadyMD and actually being able to have like longer appointments than you have with any doctor locally under the kind of fee for service system that is most predominant in healthcare in this country, where doctors can only really talk to you for 10 or 15 minutes, right? And they're rushing you and you're like, what the hell? I want to talk to you about so many other things, but they don't have the time for that. And I love that, on SteadyMD, I have the time, more than enough time to talk to my patients. And then because they can text me, call me, video chat me at any time in their future that, that they are my patient, then I have the long-term access to not only suggest changes, but then follow up and make sure that they're actually making these changes and that I'm available in any way that I can be to help them to kind of make these things sustainable. So I'm having a lot of my patients on SteadyMD ask me about COVID-19, ask me about what they can do to improve their chances and kind of, make better decisions. And like, I now actually have the time to do what I went to med school to do, which is improve people's lives, right? I didn't go to med school to be a pill pusher or to work for big pharma.
Yeah.
And with SteadyMD, I have the luxury of doing that without insurance, kind of, getting on my back for whatever they think is a big deal. So.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome, man. Well, we definitely need to have you back on after all this stuff is over so we can talk about other things.
Yeah.
Because this was a fun one, and I think people are really going to like this. So, and I'm sure people are would love to hear your opinion on many more things and hear more about you. So that'd be awesome. We should definitely do that.
Yeah. It's funny, John, remember when we were first talking about this podcast and doing this, I told you I'd be down if you'd let me come to Cali and then we work out. Yeah. I get you to snatch 225 because I still, have you hit that number yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. I'm going to make it happen. I'll make it happen. So yeah, I would love to come back in the future and talk to you guys some more and hopefully even talk more about CrossFit and kind of, how I feel about CrossFit and because I'm telling you, man, I could talk about CrossFit for even though I don't think it's the only way, I definitely have strong beliefs about have you ever sat back and thought about what CrossFit basically gamifies fitness?
Yeah.
You thought about that? It literally sets us all up in a way that we want to keep improving because we want to keep beating people in the gym or hitting PRs and blah, blah, blah. And it's literally gamified fitness and set up this system where we're all addicted and we're literally addicted to kind of improving our health and improving our fitness. And I mean, it's in my opinion, it's one of the best things that you can do if you actually want to stay in this in the long term. And I mean, I'm 10 years in. And if you tell me right now that 10 years from now, I'm still going to be doing it, I would not doubt you at all.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. So yeah, maybe we can talk about that some more next time.
For sure.
Sounds good, dude.
Cool, man. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thanks again so much.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys letting me on. Have a good day. Okay.
Peace out, man.
See ya.